morning. Good morning. Woo.
What up? All right.
What
So
up?
today, you got to readjust your camera. Today,
My monitor.
we actually saw this report come out yesterday, but we are on pace for over $100 billion in realtor commissions to be paid out this year for the first time ever. So, how much are you on pace to earn? It should probably be more.
I mean, that's pretty staggering when you think about it. And that's why we see so much money rushing into this industry from, big Wall Street and things of that nature. It's because that's too much to ignore. $100 billion business is staggering. And so for
Mhm.
real estate agents to be generating that level of commissions, congratulations to us as an industry in the first place, because, again, you can't ignore that. You know what I mean? It's huge. It's fantastic. Jake, when you brought this up, your position on this was what specifically?
So if you're not having the best year of your career, right? Assuming this isn't year like 1 or 2, right?
Right.
So if you've been in the game for a little bit now, right, and you're not on pace to have the best year by far, something's off, right? Because it's not like I've had people, and sometimes it's annoying to hear the face of reality hit you sometimes. However, I'm gonna give you some tough love today. So like the COVID story, the pandemic, the whatever, like I feel like some people use that to boost their business. Some people use that as like a, hey, listen, I understand that it was a weird time and you didn't understand if you could go outside in some cases, and some states were way different than others. And I totally
Yeah.
get it. However, if you have goals and you are serious about hitting them, now should be easier than it's ever been, right? Because there's more business to be had. So even if you kept the same market share as what you have before, you should have grown, right? So if you've stayed stagnant or grown just a little bit or gone backwards, you've missed the boat, right? And we want to get you back on the boat if you're on the boat, or if you're not on the boat. And if you're on the boat, we want to get you a better seat on the boat, right? Because you can get a share. The flip side of this is that this is the best year ever for real estate agents, right? This is the most up and down cyclical business that I've ever seen, right? So it's going to come back around at some point. So get in while the getting's good, but be prepared for when it shifts.
So I want to take a polar opposite approach to this, because I was thinking on the way here, like you gave me the topic of this right yesterday, and that's kind of how we do things. Like we go back and forth on the topic. Usually we try to do it, a couple days in advance. And I knew that was your position, and so I'm thinking about my thought process on it, and I was like, I really just don't necessarily agree with that. You can't hide from the numbers, right? More commissions ever generated than in the history of the industry. However, the agents that I talk to, they're saying something different, man. They're saying like, look, it's a tougher market. There's less inventory. It's multiple offers on every single home. I'm not making as much money. And I hear that more than I do what you just said. And so, I have to recognize that first, right? Because
Yeah.
it is a tougher market. And then I want to talk about why that is and what's going to happen in the future and how to prevent that from ever being the case again. And because, it's hard. Like you hear everybody making all this money, and if you're out there and you're beating your head up against the wall, you're like, "Go, where's it at? Like, what's wrong with me?" You know what I mean? If this is the best year ever, I might as well just go find something else to do. Seriously, like a lot of agents are really struggling in this market, and I think what happened. I mean, it took me by surprise, right? Like during COVID, we were like, "Man, there's going to be all these foreclosures." And had the government not stepped in, there would have been. That was for sure going to be the case. Didn't see, CF Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, whatever CFPB, whatever it is, coming and stepping in and doing what they did, and it had a really interesting effect on the market. Not just that, I read a stat, I didn't verify it, but like 10% of all homeowners moved over the past year, and a lot of this was out of emotions. I moved, right? I moved out of emotions. I moved because I was in a very nice neighborhood. And of course, I was wanting to move for a while, but I was like, you know what? I want to go get some space. So I moved out into some land, and my friends are making fun of me. I got a tractor coming today, right?
Farmer
Like I'm ordering,
Mike.
I ordered a brand new tractor. I'm really excited about it. I know, right? Like, who would have ever thought? I hate tractors. All right, I grew up hating tractors. My dad, he always had a bunch of land. I had to mow with these tractors. I was like, I'll never do that again.
You
So I'm
can't
super
run
excited
away
about it.
from
Anyway,
you can't run away from your Nebraska roots, bro.
that's right, brother. That's right. But here's the deal. Here's the deal. I did make an emotional choice. I was like, you know what? I don't want to be cramped in to this fancy golf course neighborhood anymore. And I want to go out and I want to get some space due to what I experienced during the shutdowns. Of course, I didn't stick around for that. I went up to Lake of the Ozarks. But my point is this, a lot of things have happened very quickly. And what caught me off guard was how fast that they occurred. Like, we knew this seller's market was shifting. Like, we were talking about it in internal meetings. We're like, hey, we're gonna have to recognize this. We're gonna have to create some game plans around it. What's the plan? What are we gonna do prior to that shift? We generally discourage customers from generating seller leads on our platform because it takes more skill to convert a seller lead, and it's a longer cash conversion cycle. So if you generate a seller lead today, it could be 4 or 6 months before you see a return on that investment. Where if you generate a buyer lead today and they're ready to go and they're low hanging fruit, and all you got to do is find them a house, you could get that money in 45 days, right? Maybe 50, 60 if you had to stretch it out and shop with them for a couple of weeks. And so we made these shifts. But what shocked me was how fast the market changed. It was just like, almost instantly, right? And so a lot of agents, I think, were caught off guard because of this, Jake, and they were caught off guard because they were doing the things that they were doing before to generate business, which worked pretty well, right? Some of them had good lead gen in place. Some of them were doing sphere. Some of them were doing cold calling, door knocking, calling expired FISBOs, what have you. And then all of a sudden, it was just like poof, the market shifted tremendously, right? Like, all that money they printed hit, the people who wanted to spend it into the asset classes like stocks and real estate, right?
Yep.
And it was just on. We had these emotional decisions. They're still being made right now. That's why we're seeing all these crazy, crazy offers, even still. And the thing that could have protected you from that could have got you ready is if you had a couple of different things in place. One would have been a system to generate you consistent business, and not just buy side, but also sell side, right? And then the other would have been, having multiple pillars of business generating. What would we call this? I mean, I always call it different forms of media for marketing, but I think there's a better term, because maybe your sphere is good for you. Maybe that's one of the pillars that you had. Maybe that was your sole pillar, and then that kind of crumbled. But you have to have multiple pillars to be able to make sure that you have a sturdy business. And when one of them crumbles, you're not out of business, right? You can just take the time, because you got these other ones, pumping out money, to go and find one to replace the one that kind of dried up. And so I think that that's what happened with a lot of agents. They didn't have this wherewithal. They didn't have multiple pillars. A lot of really good, like, in between agents, you know what I mean, have maybe one pillar, maybe one or two, and those just kind of crumbled quickly. And so when you go to set up a system, right, after the fact, when you're behind the eight ball, it's infinitely harder than when you have it in place. And the reason why I'm telling you that now is because you're probably going like, oh, well, gee, that's great advice I could have used like 7, 8, 10 months ago, right? Is it's just going to happen again. I personally think that we're in a shift already back to a more traditional market, or even a buyer's market. We don't even know about it yet. Now, I want to be clear, like, that's just an educated guess based on some of the whispers and things I'm seeing around the country. Could be totally off base, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen in the future, if not the near future. And so if you don't want to be caught in the same position, maybe you found a couple of little pillars that are working right now to help you with, this particular market, but you need to have the next ones ready and in place so that you have a strategy for these things when the market shifts. Because I've been through several market shifts now, Jake, and I mean, they seem to be speeding up in the pace in which they come.
Yes, and I think that probably has something to do with the step in from reactions from like the Fed and different government entities that like react to things quicker just because they don't want things to crash. Like, thankfully, there was things that happened that allowed the foreclosure crisis that would have been a crisis if not for some helping hands there.
No. That felt like a crisis to me. Let me tell you, that was horrible. Like,
No. I'm not saying back then. I'm saying this one that was
yeah,
crisis averted. You know what I mean?
Artificially staved off 110%. Yeah.
Right. And with some people making more money with unemployment and all that stuff, right? Like, there was all kinds of just help that was never before seen. So,
yep.
But I mean, like, you do have a very valid point, and probably the biggest takeaway is the multiple pillars, because as long as you can, and this is highlighted more in big teams, right? Because they need to have multiple pillars to be able to grow. Because like
Yeah,
when
they'll
you
hit that law of
usually
diminishing returns much quicker.
exactly. You right before you're like, okay, I'm gonna stop digging here because this is probably as good as it's gonna get. Now I gotta find somewhere else to dig. And then it's just like, okay, so I got ISAs calling FISBOs and expireds, and I got this, this source coming over here from Zillow or whatever, and everybody's like, oh, Zillow's the enemy. And it's like, well, they got me a 8x return last year, so I'm not above that, right? So I totally get it, right? But
Yeah.
as long as you can have that, what I've seen now over the course of 8 years of seeing this and shifts and stuff is like some stuff just it varies on how well it works. But as long as it can have an overall positive ROI and you're not thinking about it emotionally, like you're gonna see the different pillars produce different times and be better, and sometimes be like, oh, what happened there? Make some tweaks, and then it goes on, right? And different pillars are just sources of business. So you might have Google leads coming in, you might have Facebook leads coming in, you might have Zillow, you might have Realtor.com, you might have data, circle prospecting. Like there's so many different ways to generate business, and that's why as a real estate agent, you're probably one of the most advertised to people out there, right? Of different things of like, ooh, this works, ooh,
Well,
this works,
because
ooh, this works.
how much of that 100 billion went back into marketing, right? Like I read a stat, and this was a while back, but that real estate was the number one most advertised item in the country. Second were cars. I don't know if that's true. I read it. Seemed to be true, but I'm sure a sizable chunk of that 100 billion goes back into marketing. So yeah, there are a lot of people with their hands out. But the thing that you have to do as a business person is you have to make sure that you have systems in place that are measured and really held accountable to your marketing dollars, to your ad spend, so that you're constantly watching and making sure that you get that money back, because it always changes. Not just the market, but the marketing changes, right? I mean,
Yep.
I've talked about this before. Years ago, there was no Facebook, right? I can remember that time. It was not fashionable to advertise on Google, right? Like pay per click on Google was not really the thing. There was Yahoo Homes for a time that was hot. I mean, like there's just always going to be shifts and changes, and it's this. I know. Go ahead and laugh. I'm dating myself, but it's true though. It's the ability to have the discipline and the systems in place to test and track and hold that accountable to an ROI that will allow you to fluidly shift with the market without much pain, right? It's always a pain in the butt when you got to stop, drop, and fix something, but at least you know what to stop, drop, and fix. That's like 99% of the battle. You know what I mean? If you don't know that, then you're just kind of stuck. And you're looking around going, well, where's my piece of the pie, right? And so I love the analogy. I'm going to botch it, but I'm going to give it anyway. Of the guy who used to fill up the little communion cups in church, right? So the guy who used to fill up the communion cups in church, he would take all day to fill these little cups up, right, on Saturday before the Sunday service. One day he decided to take some time to build a bladder, right, that would fill them all up simultaneously. So he'd fill up the thing, turn the bladder on, fill them all up, right? So what used to take him a whole day now only takes him an hour. Now it took him a couple days to build this bladder, but what he did was he was able to work on his business instead of just in it, right, so to speak, right, and pay it forward. And that couple of days that he invested saved him, right, like 7 hours for the rest of his life as far as he was volunteering for that position. And so, it's the same thing in your business. If you don't have systems in place to deliver you consistently buyers and sellers, right? And I always suggest, and I hate bringing this up, but if you're not familiar with online lead gen, it's much easier to learn it from a buyer standpoint. And the reason why is because again, it takes like zero skill to convert a buyer, right? Three-quarter of them are going to do business with the first agent they meet. And then when they're pre-approved and ready, all you have to do is find them a house that they like, right? So it's like not that hard of a job in that regard. And it's much faster to get the money back from an online lead. And so, if you haven't done this before, I still highly recommend considering starting there, depending on your market and whether or not you have inventory. If you don't, then you have no choice. You got to start on the seller side, which is fine too. You got to, what was I saying to my buddy the other day? All metal is forged. So,
Right.
You'll learn the tougher side first. And then if you got to switch, it'll be much easier to make that transition in the future. But you got to have these pillars in place because I see a lot more shifts coming, Jake, and like I said, I see him probably. I've already witnessed them happening more frequently. I mean, it seems like yesterday was 2008. Maybe I'm wrong. You know what I mean? But I think that we're going to have this back and forth ebb and flow, and I think that there's going to be other unforeseen factors that we never really guessed before that are going to interrupt, the harmony within the industry. Outside influences like that lawsuit we'll talk about here in the future with the DOJ and the antitrust, and then these big entities coming into our space and pouring in. What did Zillow spend in R&D last year? I don't know if you recall, and
800 million or something
it
stupid.
was it was staggering. I know it was in the hundreds of millions of dollars range, but I mean that's a lot of money and that's a lot of brain trust to look at how to get more of that 100 billion in commissions into their coffers, right? And so
Right.
we don't even know the things that are going to come up against us as an industry, but I do believe that a couple of things. One, real estate is local. That's a good thing. It's a business that is um, even though there is a lot of times bad rap as far as the sales side of it is concerned, it's a business that requires a level of integrity. So they like to do business with a person, and I think that the more you dominate on a local level, the more your market share, and the harder it's going to be for outside influences to break in and chisel away at what it is you have. I was talking to a friend, mutual friend of ours, and he was talking about paying referral fees. And he said, after two, I don't mind. He's like, you got to pay on the first one when they send the customer to you, and the second one when that customer sends one to you. He said, but after that, there are customers, and there are customers for life. And so, that's the way that he looks at it. And he's spot on, right? That's building a real robust long-term business. And, in the real estate industry, if you do a good job servicing them, they'll become a fan. And not only will they continue to come back to you if you have mechanisms in place to continue to stay in touch with them, but they'll also send you people, which is really cool, right?
Yep, and that's the true like lifetime value of a customer. And
Yeah.
when you're thinking about it, not as how am I going to pay my bills and feel comfortable and feel financially secure in my own personal, right? But thinking of
Yeah.
it as a business, right? Like, you always talk about the coffee flavored candy, right? The generational
Mm-hmm.
type foresight that it
Yeah.
takes. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Nestle,
Like,
Nestle in Japan.
yeah.
The culture code, the book, The Culture
Right.
Code. Yep.
Nestle, when they were planning, right, are not planning for the
They were
next
attempting
two
to sell
months.
coffee. They couldn't sell coffee in Japan to save their life because they drank tea, and they created a generational plan. So they're like, well, what are they sent psychologists over. They're like, what are the earliest interactions that these kids have with coffee? And they talked about America, and Sunday mornings, and smell of bacon and eggs, having a nice lazy Sunday morning with family, coffee brewing. That's like our interaction first with coffee. Over there was none, so they made coffee flavored candy. And then here they were, like a generation later, selling, tons, literally, like tons and tons of coffee. And I don't even know how many tons they sell in Japan
Right.
consumes now because of that. But yeah, it does sometimes takes that amount of time to change a behavior of a consumer, and that's what
Right.
I really think. These companies that want to disrupt, like Zillow and things of that nature, are up against. And I know that you've told me in the past, a lot of the Fortune 500 companies, was it, have like a 100-year strategy? What was it you told me?
Yeah. Well, just even in it's like your guiding light, right? So like Vern Harnish, who wrote Mastering the Rockefeller Habits and then Scaling Up, has dissected and gone through business strategy with most of the like not most of the Fortune 500 companies, but a lot of he like just studying Fortune 500 companies and the fastest growing companies out there, and they all have strategic plans. And he's got this one page strategic plan that you're supposed to have your purpose, and your purpose of the company is supposed to be your guiding light for 100 years. So like when we would sit down in strategies and stuff, it would like there was one time where we got so caught up in it, it literally was like a day long conversation over like, no, because what if 50 years from now we were gonna like that couldn't be applying, and it was like, oh, we're getting caught up in the weeds.
So far
Like,
into the weeds. Well, I remember watching. I don't know if it was a documentary on Ray Kroc or if it was the movie, but he said, "I don't know what we'll be selling 100 years from now, but whatever it is, we're going to be selling a lot of it." And I was like, "Wow, that's pretty." That's pretty bold, but then you look at the flip side of that, right? So, in the industry's defense, how many Fortune 500 companies have been around actually 100 years? I think it's very small, right? Like a handful, right?
Probably,
So
yeah, 10.
yeah. And so I don't think that there is a competitor in the game that is, going to maybe stick with it for that level of time. I mean, we've been sticking with it as an industry for 200 years now, right? I don't think they have that level of plan. If they do, I don't think it would necessarily be executable. However, for you and your business in your local market, you do need to be thinking about your entire career and the next
Exactly.
20, 30 years, right? Whatever you think you're going to be in the space for, and how to make sure that you maintain a robust business, through these different techniques in order to capture and continue to work with that market share. I read a stat. I think it's every 5 to 7 years people move. Is that right?
Mhm.
Something
Yep.
to that effect. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So I mean, 5 to 7 years ago, if you were selling houses, you should be selling those people the next house. You should be selling the house that you sold them. Right now, it's not that easy. I was always really poor at this, admittedly. Like having a good referral strategy to keep top of mind conscious in place with my past customers, because it was just so dang easy for me to get new ones. Unfortunately, you
Right.
know? Yeah.
But you look at that, and it's really thinking about things from how long. Well, because there's two options. It's either how long do you plan on being in business, or I've talked to so many people that want to get their children involved, and then or their children are involved. Like we have an appointment with an old client of ours this week. I saw her name come across, but I sold coaching to her mom, right? And then her mom has retired and given the team, but like high producing hundreds of deals a year team was passed on to her daughter, right? Like that's
Oh
a
wow,
$2 million business asset that got passed on, right?
that's
And it was
awesome.
like it was just her, and then it was her and her daughter, and now she dropped off, and it's just her, right? So she's got
Yep,
this legacy that she's been able to leave, right? But she
that's
built this
fantastic.
thing up that's like a money tree essentially, right?
Yeah.
Like and taught her how to do everything. So if that's the plan, then you should have a plan for however long that's going to be, right? If you know that you're not going to do anything like that, but you need to make X amount of dollars so you can retire in 15 years or 10 years or 20 years, right? You should have a plan that considers that entire time frame, because like when you build something like that, like you can get to the point where you can actually sell it if you wanted to, like that
Oh yeah,
happens
without a
in real
doubt.
estate.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be more and more prevalent, because I think as time goes on, the agents that don't falter or get shaken from these different outside influences are going to have the strongest, hardest to crack business, and the only choice they're going to have, right, is to purchase them. And a lot of business schools, that's what they teach, right? That's how you grow your business, is through acquisitions, right? Not by competing. And so, if you got the capital, like, why not go for it? Good for you, good for the person selling. But
Right.
back to the point, Jake. I think more than anything, I just wanted to empathize with the people who maybe aren't feeling, like this is the best
I
year
agree.
ever.
I agree. I'll
Yeah,
take a step back. I'll take a step back from the
yeah.
policy of truth.
Right? Yeah. But in your defense, I mean, you can't argue with the numbers, right? They don't lie, and that's just unbelievable to me, because that's not the word that I hear. Oftentimes, I don't hear that people are doing badly, and I guess it's mixed. Some people are just killing it, and some people are still kind of like treading water. And
It's like,
um, yeah, I guess
yeah.
I talk to more of the treading water people these days than I do the killing it people. Maybe I need to think about that for a minute. Yeah. What am I doing? What am I doing? I
Right.
guess I'm always trying to help is what I'm doing. So I guess I probably attract people that could use help. But again, just to recap and reiterate, you need to have some solid systems in place that are consistent in generating you both buyer and seller leads. So kind of like a teeter totter. When the market shifts, you can just shift the money over here. When the market shifts, you can shift the money over here. And that's the nice thing about being a business person in the industry, and understanding really how to generate business on a consistent basis, how to spend a dime and get back a buck. If you can do that, then you can just point that gun anywhere at any time. And especially if you have a nice large database, that database will cover up a lot of sins. It'll cover up a lot of bad reaction time if you didn't shift quick enough within the market, because you have a huge database. I've got the lake house for sale, and I was just thinking about, like, who has the largest database up there. I could blast it out to, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't know, but it'd be interesting if there was a way to find that out, because whoever that is has done the most diligence in their market and been the most prolific. You know what I mean? With the most foresight as far as gathering up that information, gathering up those people on a regular basis, and being able to have that large audience of people to market to. And so, you know, it is what it is. My old one I sold with the company, unfortunately.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say you can't blast that list, but
No.
I think a good way to do it would be to be in the area and go on the old Facebook to see who's advertising to you, and see if it was
Oh,
somebody that's been advertising since when you were there.
that's a good point. That's a good point. It's just so hard for folks to stay consistent in that realm. I think the biggest quality that I've found in having success in any business that I've been involved in is delayed gratification. It's such a hard one, and it's so just you know opposite of our society today. It's so hard for people to wait for anything, and I for me, it's just always been very natural. I'd rather wait for the good deal than get into a bad one.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how I've always been. Yeah, and I don't mind a long term strategy and figuring something out and sticking with it and staying laser focused until I get to the goal. But that's me. I'm trying to drill that into my son. It's very difficult.
It
He's
is.
like, now, 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 now. I want it now. So
Everything, right? Even
yeah,
like coaching baseball has its challenges, because baseball, I mean, it's like a long game and there's not much success, right? Like when you
yeah.
get to the major leagues, like you hit 300, you're in the Hall of Fame. So a 30% success rate, right? And they're like, oh well, video games, I can win 4 times in 15 minutes. So one time
Not
in
yeah.
an hour and a half is not that exciting.
I'll never forget Tony Robbins. Most people overestimate what they can do in a year, underestimate what they can do in 10. And I think that's where we should wrap this up, because that's the point. You know what I mean? And if you're not thinking like that, if you think that it's going to be difficult, what you're doing today is going to generate your business 3 to 6 months from now. So if you're not being kind to yourself today and doing the right things, 3 to 6 months from now, you're going to be in the same boat. Definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Now, you can blame all the external factors you want,
Don't
but
do it.
you need to be sure that you're doing the right things today so that no matter what the outcome is 3 to 6 months from now, you're going to be on top.
Boom. Love it.
All right. Well, if you want some help with any of these strategies, that's what we do here at Market Maker. Go to marketmakercall.com, watch a video on how we generate leads for you, nurture those leads in a way that elevates your status and authority in the mind of those leads, and then ultimately delivers them to your calendar as a pre-positioned appointment. It is exclusive. It's 1 per zip code. Marketmakercall.com. Go check it out.
And as we always say here at Market Maker, you are always just one pre-position appointment away.
Every day.
Go
Make it a
get
great
it.
day.
Peace.
Later.